The night I signed for my six-figure military bonus, my account went empty like it never existed. The bank said there was a family fiduciary directive transferring funds to another account signed by my own parents. While I was flying midnight rescue ops, they'd used family love to turn me into their personal ATM. They thought I'd stay quiet to avoid scandal in the ranks. They forgot I was trained to fly into storms, and this time, I was the storm. My name is Avery Monroe, and I've been flying rescue helicopters for the Atlantic Defense Command for 8 years. That night at Fort Redwood Airfield, the rotor blades cut through the darkness at 2:30 a.m., their rhythmic thump matching my heartbeat as I completed another medevac drill. The hangar lights cast long shadows across the tarmac, and I remember thinking how different this controlled chaos was from the chaos I grew up in. My parents, Dale and Marla Monroe, never met a get-rich-quick scheme they didn't love. Growing up in our cramped Riverton apartment, I watched them max out credit cards for investment opportunities, scratch lottery tickets at the kitchen table while bills piled up unopened, and borrow against tomorrow for today's wants. They called it playing the system. I called it drowning in denial. The military was my escape route. Clean lines, clear rules, predictable paychecks. When I signed my re-enlistment papers that evening, the bonus amount made my hands shake slightly. $120,000, to be dispersed in installments. It was more money than my parents had ever seen in one place, more than I'd ever imagined having. I'd planned every penny pay off my student loans, buy a reliable car, start an emergency fund, maybe even help my parents with their latest credit card disaster, if they asked nicely. The next morning changed everything. I checked my account at 0600 hours, coffee still steaming in my hand. The balance showed 0. Not a pending transaction, not a hold just empty, like someone had reached in and scooped it clean. There must be a mistake, I told the bank representative, my voice steady despite the ice forming in my stomach. No mistake. Ms. Monroe, she said, typing rapidly. There's a family fiduciary directive on file, notarized last week. The funds were transferred to a Monroe family trust account as per the documentation. I never signed any directive. The signature is here, ma'am, along with a medical assessment stating temporary incapacitation due to service-related PTSD. My coffee mug hit the desk hard enough to slosh. PTSD, I'd passed every psychological evaluation with flying colors. My fitness reports were spotless. That afternoon, my parents appeared at my base housing unit like nothing had happened. Mom carried a casserole dish. Dad hauled a new kitchen mixer still in its box. Surprise, Mom chirped, setting the dish on my counter. Well, we thought you could use some home cooking after all those long flights. Where's my money? Dad's face shifted to that expression I knew too well, the one he wore when creditors called. Now, sweetheart, that's family money. You're just holding it for us temporarily. We're protecting it from taxes, making sure it grows. You stole from me. Stole? Mom's voice pitched high, wounded. We're your parents. We changed your diapers, put you through school. I put myself through school, with loans, that I was going to pay off with that bonus. Dad stepped closer, his voice dropping. Family sticks together. Avery. Blood understands blood. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. You've got a reputation to maintain here, don't you? Would hate for your commanding officers to hear you're having stability issues. The threat hung between us like a loaded weapon. In the military, reputation was everything. Mental health questions could ground a pilot, end a career. They were betting I'd stay quiet rather than risk the scandal. I smiled, the kind of smile I'd learned during survival training. Thanks for the mixer. You should go. After they left, I stood in my kitchen, staring at that stupid mixer like it was evidence at a crime scene. In the distance, I could hear helicopters taking off for evening maneuvers. My hands weren't shaking anymore. In combat rescue, we had a saying, stay calm, stay alive, complete the mission. My parents had just declared war. They simply didn't know it yet. The next morning at 0700 hours, I found Juno Alvarez in the squadron's financial office, surrounded by 3 monitors and a fortress of energy drinks. Juno had been the unit's financial coordinator for 5 years and had seen every scam, every desperate spouse, every bad decision a service member could make with money. "I need a favor," I said, closing the door behind me. She looked up from her spreadsheets. "The kind that requires documentation, or the kind that requires me to forget I saw something. Documentation. All of it." I laid out the situation while Juno's fingers flew across her keyboard. Her expression darkened with each detail. "Your parents did this. Your actual parents. Blood understands blood, apparently. Blood understands bullshit is more like it." She pulled up transaction records, her screens filling with data. "Okay, here's the transfer. Initiated at 11:43 p.m. on the 15th. That's interesting, weren't you flying that night? Lake Erie rescue simulation. I have the flight logs." "Perfect. Now, this family fiduciary directive." She squinted at her screen. "Notarized by a Harlan Notary Services. That's not a regular office, it's a mobile operation. Guy works out of his van, does house calls, hospital visits." "Hospital visits. Yeah, see this note here, location of notarization listed as Riverton Medical Center, room 403. "They're claiming you were hospitalized." My stomach turned. "I've never been a patient at Riverton Medical." Juno pulled up another screen. "The medical assessment is signed by a Dr. Marcus Webb. License number." Hold on. More typing. "That's weird. Dr. Webb's license is for veterinary medicine. He treats horses." "You're kidding." "Nope. Your parents got a horse doctor to declare you mentally incompetent." She leaned back. "This is fraud. Avery, like, federal-level fraud." I thought about my parents, probably already spending money they'd stolen. "What else can you find?" Over the next 2 hours, Juno uncovered a pattern that made my skin crawl. 3 credit cards opened in my name during college. I'd known about those, had fought to get them closed. But there were more recent attempts: a car loan application from 6 months ago, a business loan inquiry from last year, all using my social security number. "They've been planning this," Juno said quietly. "Testing boundaries, seeing what they could get away with." "Can you trace where the money went after it hit their trust? Already on it?" Her fingers danced across the keyboard. 12,000 to pay off their visa. 8,000 to something called Sunshine Investments, LLC, let me check. "Yeah, that's a pyramid scheme that collapsed last month. 20,000 to a boat dealer as a down payment." "A boat?" "A really nice boat, apparently." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Juno, can you send me copies of everything: transaction records, the fake medical assessment, the notary details, all of it. Already compiling. You want the security footage from the base for that night too. Proves you were here, not in some hospital bed." "Everything." She burned everything onto a drive and handed it to me. "You know, most people would just accept it. Family is complicated." "My family taught me one useful thing," I said, pocketing the drive. "When someone shows you who they are, believe them." That evening, I made more discoveries. The bank had video of my mother at the counter the morning of the transfer, chatting cheerfully with the teller about her poor daughter recovering from trauma. The timestamp showed 10:15 a.m. while I was in a briefing with my commanding officer. I found an email in my drafts folder that I hadn't written, dated a week ago. "Mom and Dad, I trust you completely with my financial decisions while I recover. Please do whatever you think is best." Never sent, but saved probably their insurance policy if anyone questioned the transfer. By midnight, I had everything backed up in 3 locations, including one with my JAG officer friend at another base. Paper trails don't lie, and theirs led straight to federal prison if played right. But I wasn't going to play it their way. Prison would make them martyrs in their own minds, victims of an ungrateful daughter. No, they needed something more personal. They needed to lose what they valued most: their reputation, their schemes, and every penny they'd stolen plus interest. I opened a new document and started typing Strategic Action Plan Operation Payback. Miriam Keene's law office occupied the 3rd floor of a restored Victorian in downtown Riverton. Unlike the military JAG officers I knew, she specialized in financial fraud and identity theft, exactly what I needed. Military bonus theft by parents, she said, reviewing my documentation. That's a new one, even for me. I'd chosen Miriam carefully. Former prosecutor, 15 years of civil practice, and most importantly, no connection to my parents' social circles. She adjusted her reading glasses and methodically examined each piece of evidence. The veterinarian signing a human psychiatric evaluation is fascinating, she noted. That alone could trigger criminal charges. But you want civil action. I want them to pay. Literally. Ohio law allows for double damages in cases of conversion with fraudulent intent, triple if we prove pattern behavior. She pulled up a legal database. This credit card history, the previous attempts, we can establish pattern. The fake hospitalization pushes this into identity theft territory. How long would criminal charges take? 18 months minimum. Civil, we can move faster. She leaned forward. Here's what I propose: emergency injunction to freeze the remaining bonus payments, temporary restraining order on the Monroe Family Trust, and immediate filing for conversion, fraud, and identity theft. We hit them all at once. They'll play the family card. Say I'm ungrateful. Unstable. Miriam smiled. That's why we file with the court first, then serve them publicly. Hard to claim you're unstable when you're following legal procedure to the letter. Plus, your military psychological evaluations destroy their PTSD claim. Over the next 3 days, we built an airtight case. I took leave time, telling my commander only that I had a family legal matter to resolve. He didn't press the military, understood that sometimes homefront battles were just as critical as overseas ones. The courthouse clerk's eyes widened when she saw the stack of documentation. This is thorough. I'm a pilot. We believe in redundant systems. The emergency injunction was granted within hours. Judge Harrison, a former Marine, barely concealed his disgust when he read about the fake PTSD claim. Using mental health as a weapon against a service member, he muttered, signing the order. Seen too much of that. Next came the ADC's Office of Financial Security. I filed a formal notification, not a complaint against my parents, but a transparency report about the situation. My squadron commander would hear about this eventually, better from me than through rumors. Monroe, this is... Major Daniels read through my report twice. Your parents did this. Yes, sir. I've initiated civil proceedings. I wanted to ensure complete transparency with the command structure. Your flight status isn't in question. Your psych evals are spotless. He paused. You need anything from us? Just time to handle it, sir, and maybe a statement confirming I was flying the night they claim I was hospitalized. Done. I'll have it within the hour. The restraining order was served the next day. Miriam had arranged for a process server to deliver it to the Monroe Family Trust's registered address, my parents' house, at 2 p.m., right when Mom hosted her Wednesday book club. My phone exploded with calls by 2:30 p.m. I let them all go to voicemail. Avery Marie Monroe, you call me right now. Mom's voice screeched through the speaker. How dare you embarrass us like this? We have friends. We have standing in this community. Dad's message was more measured, more threatening. You've made a mistake, sweetheart. Family doesn't go to court. We can work this out quietly, or things might get difficult for you. I know people at Fort Redwood. One word about your instability. I forwarded both recordings to Miriam. Add witness intimidation to the filing, she texted back. The legal machine was in motion, but I needed more. They'd stolen from me expecting silence, counting on military protocol and family shame to protect them. They needed to learn that some storms you don't fly around, you fly straight through. I opened my calendar. Mom's birthday celebration at Dock 14 was in 2 weeks. Dad would invite his Rotary Club buddies. Mom would have her charity friends. They'd play the perfect parents, probably spin some story about helping their daughter through a tough time. Perfect. I texted Juno, "How do you feel about dinner theater?" Her response was immediate. "Do I get to watch your parents squirm? Front row seats? I'm in." I then sent a message to Mr. Harlan of Harlan Notary Services. You're invited to a celebration on the 28th. Doc, 14:07 p.m. We have so much to discuss about your hospital visit services. The pieces were moving into position. My parents had taught me chess when I was young, before they pawned the board. They'd forgotten the most important lesson: the queen is the most powerful piece, and she can move in any direction. Check. Dock 14 sat on Riverton's waterfront, all nautical ropes and weathered wood designed to look authentic while charging $30 for fish and chips. Mom had reserved the back room for her 62nd birthday, though we both knew she was 64. The invitation had gone out to 40 of their closest friends, the same people they'd been impressing with their sudden financial windfall. I arrived at 7:15 p.m., fashionably late in my dress blues. Military formal wear had a way of changing the temperature in a room, and tonight I wanted every degree of that shift. Avery. Mom rushed over, her smile bright enough to power the fake lighthouse in the corner. You came, and in uniform. Everyone, look, our daughter the hero. The crowd of Rotary members, church friends, and Mom's book club turned to acknowledge me with warm applause. These people had known me since childhood, watched me escape to the military, celebrated my achievements from afar. Dad approached with a bourbon in hand, his jaw tight. Interesting choice of outfit. Interesting choice of notary, I replied quietly. His eyes flicked to the corner where Juno sat, disguised in a blonde wig and cocktail dress. Phone angled perfectly to capture the room. At another table, Miriam Keene nursed a martini while appearing to read a menu. Dale. A heavy hand landed on Dad's shoulder. This must be the daughter. Heard you've been helping her through some tough times. The toughest, Dad said, his politician smile snapping into place. Family takes care of family. At 7:45 p.m., Thomas Harlan walked in. The mobile notary looked uncomfortable in his ill-fitting blazer, scanning the room nervously. I'd told him he'd won a Veterans Appreciation Dinner. Technically true, I was a veteran, and I'd certainly appreciate his presence. Mr. Harlan, I called out warmly. So glad you could make it. Mom's face went pale. Dad's bourbon sloshed slightly. Ms. Monroe. Harlan looked confused. You look well. Never better. In fact, I was just telling everyone about that night you provided your services. When was it again? The 15th? Yes, at the hospital. Riverton Medical, room 403, 11:43 p.m. I pulled out my phone, projecting calm. That's so interesting because I have my flight logs here. Would you like to see them? I was at 8,000 feet over Lake Erie at that exact moment. The room had grown quieter, conversations trailing off as people tuned into our exchange. Harlan's face reddened. There must be some confusion. Oh, there is. See, you notarized a document claiming I was hospitalized with PTSD, but I've never been a patient at Riverton Medical. In fact, I pulled up the hospital's patient database on my phone. Juno had worked her magic earlier. Room 403 was occupied that night by an 87-year-old man recovering from hip surgery. Dale? One of the Rotary members stepped closer. What's she talking about? Dad tried to steer Harlan away. This isn't the time. Actually, it's the perfect time. I addressed the room now, my voice carrying with military precision. My parents stole my military re-enlistment bonus, $120,000. They used Mr. Harlan here to notarize fraudulent documents claiming I was mentally incompetent. The silence was deafening. Mom laughed shrilly. Sweetheart, you're confused. We were protecting. You were stealing. Here's the bank transfer. I held up my phone, showing the documentation. Here's the falsified medical evaluation signed by a veterinarian. Yes, a horse doctor. And here, I played the voicemail, is Dad threatening me if I didn't stay quiet. The Rotary president, Judge Walsh, stood slowly. Dale, is this true? She's unstable, Mom cried. The military damaged her. We had to take control. Then you won't mind if I share my latest psychological evaluation. I pulled out the official ADC document, completed 3 days ago. Perfect scores across all metrics. Flight status fully qualified. Harlan tried to edge toward the door, but found Miriam Keene blocking his path. Mr. Harlan, I'm attorney Miriam Keene. We need to discuss your notary practices. Specifically, the $500 in cash you accepted to falsify official documents. They said she agreed. They said she was sick. Sick enough to fly rescue missions. I pulled up the local newspaper's website, showing an article from that week featuring our unit's training exercises. My picture prominent in the crew photo. The room erupted. Questions, accusations, people pulling away from my parents like they were contaminated. Mom's book club president whispered something about missing charity funds. A Rotary member mentioned a suspicious investment opportunity Dad had pitched. You ungrateful! Dad lunged forward, but stopped when he realized 3 veterans in the room had stepped between us. I think you should leave, Judge Walsh said coldly. Both of you. As my parents were essentially escorted out of Mom's own birthday party, I caught Harlan at the door. The state licensing board will be very interested in your mobile notary business. Especially the other documents you've notarized. We found 12 suspicious cases in the last year alone. He blanched. I want a lawyer. Good choice. You'll need one. The room slowly returned to conversation, though the energy had fundamentally shifted. Several people approached me with apologies, stories, suspicions they'd harbored about my parents for years, but I wasn't done. Not yet. The Riverton Veterans Foundation meeting was held in the basement of First Methodist Church every second Thursday. Fluorescent lights hummed over folding chairs and coffee urns that had seen better decades. My parents had volunteered here for 5 years, building their reputation as generous supporters of those who served. Tonight, they sat in the front row as usual, having somehow maintained their positions despite the disaster at Mom's birthday party 2 weeks ago. They'd spun a story about a misunderstanding, family tensions, military stress. Some people bought it. Others waited to see what would happen next. I stood at the back of the room as the meeting began at 7 p.m. sharp. The agenda included fundraising updates, upcoming events, and a special presentation on supporting service members with PTSD. Ironic, considering. Before we continue, Chairman Roberts announced, Avery Monroe has asked to say a few words about her recent deployment experiences. My parents stiffened. They hadn't known I was coming. I walked to the front, each step measured. The microphone squealed briefly as I adjusted it. Thank you, Chairman Roberts. I'm not here to talk about deployment, though. I'm here to talk about trust. The room settled into uncomfortable attention. Last month, I completed a water rescue training over Lake Erie. 16 hours of flight time in dangerous conditions. That same night, while I was pulling hypothermic swimmers from 38-degree water, someone filed paperwork claiming I was in a psychiatric ward. I clicked my laptop, and the projector showed my flight logs next to the notarized documents. Side by side, the fraud was undeniable. That someone was my parents. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Dad started to stand, but 2 Vietnam vets beside him placed firm hands on his shoulders. They stole my re-enlistment bonus money earned through 8 years of service, multiple deployments, countless missions. They did it using falsified medical documents and a corrupt notary. The next slide showed the bank transfers, then the fake medical evaluation, then a photo of Dr. Webb's veterinary clinic with a sign advertising equine psychiatry helping troubled horses. Someone actually laughed. Dark, bitter laughter. But still. But here's what really matters to everyone in this room, I continued, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. They used PTSD as a weapon. They turned the real struggles of real veterans into a tool for theft. I clicked again. The screen showed donation records from the Veterans Foundation. Over the past 3 years, you've raised $200,000 for PTSD support programs, life-saving money, critical resources, and my parents, who helped raise that money, who stood right here talking about supporting our troubled veterans, decided to fake my mental illness for profit. That's enough, Mom shrieked, jumping to her feet. You're sick. You need help. I have help. I pulled out my latest evaluation. Signed by 3 military psychiatrists. I also have this. The screen changed to show a video Juno had captured at the birthday party. There was Harlan, clear as day, admitting he'd never actually seen me at the hospital. There was Dad, calling me unstable. There was Mom, weeping about military damage while the room full of witnesses looked on in horror. "We tried to protect you," Dad shouted. That money would have been wasted on paying off student loans, on reliable transportation, on the emergency fund every financial advisor recommends. I let that sink in. Or did you mean wasted because I wasn't spending it on boats and pyramid schemes? Chairman Roberts stood slowly. He was former Army, enlisted during Vietnam, and had zero tolerance for what he called stolen valor in any form. "Dale, Marla, I'm going to need your resignation from the foundation. Effective immediately." "You can't," Mom started. "I can. Section 3 of our bylaws, any member found to have committed fraud related to military service or benefits is subject to immediate removal." He turned to the room. All in favor. Every hand went up, even people who'd been their friends for years. "Furthermore," Roberts continued, "we'll be reviewing all financial transactions you've handled for the foundation." That's when Dad cracked, "Fine, we took it, but she owes us. We raised her, spent everything on her." "I have receipts," I interrupted. "Every loan I took for college, every shift I worked to pay rent starting at 16, every birthday card with $5 and a note about money being tight while you bought lottery tickets." Should I continue? The local newspaper reporter, invited to cover the foundation's upcoming charity drive, scribbled furiously in her notebook. I'd made sure she had a front row seat. "She was deployed," someone called out. "She was saving lives while you were stealing from her." The crowd's anger became palpable. These were people who understood service, sacrifice, honor, who'd seen friends die for the values my parents had just spit on. "Leave," Chairman Roberts said quietly. "Now, and don't come back." As my parents gathered their things, Mom turned to the crowd one last time. "She's our daughter. Family is supposed to—" "Family doesn't steal," interrupted Mrs. Gonzalez, whose son died in Afghanistan. "Family doesn't lie about mental illness. Family doesn't use service against a veteran." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents left to a corridor of turned backs, the ultimate dismissal from a community they'd spent years cultivating. "Avery," Chairman Roberts said once they were gone, "I'm sorry this happened to you." "I'm not," I replied. "Now everyone knows exactly who they are." The reporter approached as the meeting resumed. "Can I quote you on that?" I thought about tomorrow's headlines, about the final blow to their reputation. Every word. The morning after the Veterans Foundation meeting, my parents went on the offensive. Dad called into local radio station WRIV's morning talk show, Riverton Rising, painting himself as a concerned father trying to protect a daughter suffering from military trauma. "She's changed." His voice crackled through my car speakers at 6:45 a.m. as I drove to base. The military broke something in her. "We were just trying to safeguard her future while she got help." The host, Mike Daniels, sounded skeptical. "But Mr. Monroe, the documentation shows she was flying missions that night." "Fabricated," Dad interrupted. "She has friends in high places. They're covering for her instability." I pulled into the parking lot and texted Miriam, "They're digging their own grave." "Let them," she replied. "Every lie is admissible." By noon, Mom had posted a lengthy Facebook manifesto about ungrateful children and the sacrifices of parenthood. She included old photos of my childhood carefully curated to show birthday parties and Christmas mornings, conveniently omitting the eviction notices and utilities shutoffs. But they'd underestimated the digital age and, more importantly, they'd underestimated Juno. "Boss, you need to see this." Juno called me into the finance office at 1:30 p.m. "Your mom's post. It's getting responses she didn't expect." The comments section had exploded. "Former neighbors describing loans never repaid. Parents from my high school detailing fundraiser money that disappeared. 3 separate people claiming my parents had used their names for credit applications. Then came the killing blow. Mrs. Patterson, my 10th grade teacher, posted a scanned letter I'd written for a class assignment about overcoming challenges. In it, 15-year-old me described working 3 jobs to buy my own school supplies while my parents spent grocery money on casino trips. "The internet never forgets," Juno said, screenshotting everything. At 3 p.m., the Riverton Gazette published their article, "Local Veterans Foundation Expels Members Over Bonus Theft Scandal." The reporter had done her homework, including pulling public records showing my parents' history of civil judgments, bankruptcies, and liens. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Ms. Monroe. This is Alice Trent from News Channel 6. We'd like to interview you about no comment," I said, hanging up. The story would spread fine without me feeding it. By evening, my parents had shifted tactics again. A process server arrived at my door with papers they were countersuing for defamation and emotional distress. I actually laughed. "They're suing me with what lawyer?" The process server shrugged. "They're representing themselves." Even better. Miriam called within minutes. "This is actually perfect. Discovery goes both ways. Now we can legally demand all their financial records." That night, the base commander called me into his office. My stomach tightened. This was what I'd feared most, the military impact. Colonel Harrison sat behind his desk, a printed stack of papers in front of him. "Monroe, I've been following your situation." "Sir, at ease." He leaned back. "That radio interview your father gave. He made a mistake. He specifically claimed you fabricated military documents." "That's an accusation against the entire command structure." "Sir, I can explain." "No need. JAG is already involved. Falsely claiming military records are fabricated is a federal matter. Your father just elevated this from civil to criminal." My knees nearly buckled with relief. "Additionally," he continued, 3 other service members have come forward. Apparently, your parents approached them over the years with various investment opportunities and emergency loans. Private Stevens lost $8,000 to them last year." "Stevens. But he never said—" He was embarrassed. "But your courage in going public gave him and others the strength to speak up." Colonel Harrison stood. "The ADC takes care of its own. Monroe, you're not fighting alone." The next morning brought more revelations. The veterinarian, Dr. Webb, had contacted Miriam directly. Terrified of losing his license, he offered a sworn affidavit detailing how my parents had paid him $500 cash to sign the evaluation, promising it was just for insurance purposes. Then came the security footage from Riverton Medical that Juno had finally accessed through a contact. It showed my parents in the lobby the night of the 15th, being escorted out by security at 9:20 p.m. for trying to access patient floors without authorization. 2 hours before they claimed I was admitted. "They tried to create an alibi and failed," Miriam explained. "This is conspiracy to commit fraud, clear as day." My parents' response was to show up at Fort Redwood's main gate at 4 p.m., demanding to speak to my commander about my dangerous behavior. They didn't get past security, but the attempt was logged, filmed, and added to the growing pile of evidence. That evening, I sat in my kitchen, the same room where they'd delivered their threats weeks ago. The mixer they'd brought as a prop still sat on the counter. I'd kept it as evidence, but now it felt like a monument to their delusion. My phone lit up with messages, support from squadron mates, stories from others they'd scammed, legal guidance from JAG, even a text from Stevens. "Thank you for being braver than I was." Tomorrow would bring the civil hearing for the restraining order. My parents would walk into that courtroom thinking they could talk their way out like always. They had no idea what was waiting for them. I picked up the mixer and finally unboxed it. Might as well get some use out of their guilt gift. As it whirred to life, I thought about the storm metaphor I'd used weeks ago. They were about to learn what happened when you flew straight into a Category 5. The Riverton County Courthouse looked different at 9 a.m. On a Tuesday, less imposing, more procedural. Judge Margaret Sullivan presided, known for her no-nonsense approach to financial fraud cases. My parents sat at the defendant's table, still representing themselves. shuffling through papers they'd printed from legal websites. Case number 2024 CV0847, Monroe versus Monroe, the bailiff announced. Miriam stood smoothly. Your Honor, we're seeking summary judgment on all counts, plus damages. The evidence is overwhelming and undisputed. Objection. Dad stood so fast his chair scraped. We dispute everything. Judge Sullivan peered over her glasses. Mr. Monroe, you'll have your chance. Ms. Keene, proceed. What followed was a methodical destruction. Miriam presented each piece of evidence like a surgeon making precise cuts. The falsified documents, the veterinarian's affidavit, the security footage from Riverton Medical, the flight logs, the ADC's official statement confirming I was on duty. Your Honor, Miriam continued, the defendants didn't just steal money. They attempted to destroy my client's military career by claiming mental incompetence. Under Ohio Revised Code, Section 2307.61, this constitutes theft by deception with malicious intent, qualifying for double damages. Triple damages, Judge Sullivan corrected, reviewing the documents. The pattern of behavior demonstrated here, credit cards opened in the plaintiff's name during college. Recent loan attempts shows persistent fraudulent conduct. Mom jumped up. She abandoned us. We sacrificed everything. Mrs. Monroe, sit down or I'll hold you in contempt. Your Honor. Dad tried a different approach, his salesman voice on full display. We're her parents. We were protecting assets from her impulsive spending. What impulsive spending? Judge Sullivan flipped through pages. I see 8 years of exemplary service records, perfect credit until you destroyed it, and financial planning documents showing intended use of funds for debt elimination and emergency savings. Where's the impulsiveness? She bought a motorcycle once, Mom blurted out. In 2019, used. For commuting to base, which she paid off early. The judge's tone could have frozen water. Anything else? Miriam introduced the final evidence financial records subpoenaed from their bank showing where the money went. $20,000 for a boat down payment, subsequently repossessed. $12,000 to credit cards charged with luxury purchases. $8,000 to a proven pyramid scheme. $30,000 withdrawn as cash, untraceable. $0 saved or invested prudently. That's our money, Dad shouted. No, Judge Sullivan said coldly. It's not. It never was. She turned to her computer, typing rapidly. I'm issuing the following judgment, $120,000 to be returned immediately to Plaintiff Avery Monroe. Additional damages of $240,000 for conversion, fraud, and identity theft. Attorney fees of $15,000. Court costs of $3,000. $378,000. Mom's voice cracked. We don't have that. Then you'll liquidate assets. The judge continued typing. I'm ordering immediate liens on all property owned by defendants. The house at 447 Maple Drive, valued at $310,000. The 2019 SUV, valued at $35,000. Investment account with Schwab showing $18,000. Bank accounts totaling $4,000. Our house. Dad went pale. Did you think about your daughter's house when you stole her down payment? Judge Sullivan's voice cut through his shock. Additionally, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney for Criminal Prosecution. Identity theft, fraud, conspiracy, and filing false medical documents are felonies in Ohio. Mom collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Dad stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Furthermore, the judge continued, Mr. Harlan, the notary, has agreed to testify in exchange for reduced charges. He's provided evidence of 6 other families you've defrauded using similar schemes. 6 others. I hadn't known about that. Your Honor, Miriam added. We'd also like to note that the defendants attempted to access Fort Redwood yesterday to file false reports about my client's mental state. This constitutes continued harassment. Noted. I'm issuing a permanent restraining order. Dale and Marla Monroe. You are forbidden from contacting Captain Monroe directly or indirectly, approaching within 500 feet of her person, residence, or place of work, or making any public statements about her mental health or military service. Captain, Dad looked at me for the first time. You got promoted. Last week, I said quietly, while you were busy destroying yourselves. Judge Sullivan signed the orders with sharp strokes. Sale of assets will be handled by court-appointed executor. Proceeds go directly to Captain Monroe. Any attempt to hide assets will result in immediate incarceration. This isn't fair, Mom wailed. We're her parents. Biology doesn't grant you the right to steal. The judge stood. I've seen many fraud cases, but using fake PTSD claims against an active service member, that's a special kind of evil. Court adjourned. The bailiff escorted my parents out as they argued and pleaded. Dad turned back once, his face a mixture of rage and disbelief. You destroyed us. No, I said clearly. You did that yourselves. I just held up the mirror. Within 48 hours, the house was listed for sale. The SUV was repossessed. Their bank accounts were frozen except for basic living expenses. The criminal charges were filed 3 counts of felony fraud each, plus conspiracy. The other families they'd scammed came forward publicly. The Johnsons, who'd lost their retirement savings. The Nguyens, whose credit was destroyed. The Smiths, who'd nearly lost their home. The total damages approached $2 million. My military bonus was restored within a week, plus interest. The additional damages would come from the house sale. My parents were facing 5 to 10 years in prison each. Justice served cold, exactly as ordered. The bank's conference room smelled like fresh coffee and justice at 10 a.m. sharp. I sat across from the manager, watching as she typed the final authorization codes. The screen flickered, then displayed the number that represented everything they'd tried to steal and more. Restitution received $240,000. The first $120,000 was my bonus returned. The rest was the court-ordered damages, pulled from the forced sale of their house, which had closed yesterday. The buyers, a young military couple, had gotten a good deal. They had no idea about the drama that had unfolded within those walls. Would you like to transfer this to a separate account? The manager asked. No, this one's fine. I pulled out the pen from my bag, the silver Mont Blanc my parents had given me for my 18th birthday, back when they still pretended to be proud of me, before they realized I wouldn't be their ATM. I signed the receipt slowly, deliberately. Each stroke of ink was a declaration of independence I should have made years ago. There's one more document, the manager said, sliding paper across the marble table. Revocation of all power of attorney, financial directives, and authorized user statuses. The pen moved across the signature line one final time. When I reached the bottom, I pressed the bank's seal onto the paper. The word revoked, stamped in red ink, looked like victory. That should do it. Captain Monroe, no one can access your accounts without your explicit, verified consent. I stood, leaving the pen on the table. It had served its purpose, but I didn't want anything they'd given me anymore. Not the guilt, not the gifts, not the gaslighting disguised as love. Outside, Fort Redwood Airfield stretched before me under a brilliant October sky. The morning sun caught the helicopters on the flight line, turning their windows into mirrors of gold. Juno waited by my car, holding my flight helmet. Ready for the training exercise? She asked. More than ready. We walked toward the hangar together, our boots clicking in rhythm on the tarmac. Behind us, the bank building grew smaller with each step. Ahead, my helicopter waited, rotors still but ready. You know they'll probably take a plea deal, Juno said. 2 to 3 years instead of 10. I know. You okay with that? I thought about it as we reached the aircraft. Was I okay with them getting off lighter than they deserved? Maybe. But they'd lost everything that mattered to them. Their reputation, their schemes, their control over me. Prison was just the receipt for a bill that had finally come due. I'm okay with moving forward, I said, taking my helmet from her. The pre-flight check was meditation in motion. Every switch, every gauge, every system verified and secure. This machine would never betray me, never lie to me, never claim love while reaching for my wallet. It would do exactly what I commanded, go exactly where I directed. As the rotors began their slow spin-up, I thought about the storm metaphor one last time, but I wasn't the storm anymore. Storms were chaotic, destructive, unpredictable. What I'd done was precise, calculated, surgical. I was the pilot who flew through the storm and came out clean on the other side. The helicopter lifted smoothly, climbing into the morning sky. Below, Riverton shrank to a patchwork of streets and buildings, each holding someone else's drama, someone else's betrayal, someone else's fight for justice. But mine was finished. At 2,000 feet, I banked west toward the training area. The radio crackled with coordinates, weather updates, mission parameters, the language of trust and professionalism. My world now, through the windscreen, endless blue stretched ahead. No clouds, no turbulence, just clear sky and possibility. For the first time in my life, I was flying without the weight of their expectations, their manipulations, their manufactured crises dragging me down. The controls responded to the slightest pressure, the aircraft dancing on invisible currents. This was freedom, not the kind they'd stolen with their greed, but the kind I'd earned with truth. Atlantic Control. This is Rescue 7, I said into the radio. Beginning training maneuvers. Roger, Rescue 7. Sky is yours. The sky was mine. The future was mine. The choice of who to trust, who to love, who to let into my life, all mine. I smiled behind my visor, pushing the throttle forward. Below, my parents' old house was already being renovated by its new owners, their lies being painted over with fresh starts. The bank had processed their financial ruin. The court had stamped their fate. And I signed my own name on my own life with my own hand. No co-signers required. Juno, I called over the internal comm. Ready for some real flying. Always ready, Captain. I pushed the stick forward, diving toward the training zone with the sun at my back and nothing but altitude ahead. The helicopter responded instantly, perfectly, honestly. Let's fly. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your own thoughts about family, boundaries, or standing up for yourself. Your experiences matter, and this community is built on supporting each other through life's turbulent flights. Until next time, keep flying high and signing your own name on your own terms.